All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping into one of the most brilliant and most important theological showdowns in history. It was delivered by a guy known simply as the theologian, Gregory of Nazianzus. And we're going to break down his absolute masterclass in argument found in his fourth oration.
But let's start with a question for you. What would you do if the very texts you hold sacred seemed to have verses that totally contradicted your most fundamental beliefs? I mean, what if your opponents could just open the book and point to a line that seems to prove you wrong?
Well, back in the 4th century, that wasn't just a thought experiment. It was a real crisis, a firestorm that was literally threatening to tear Christianity in two. And right into the middle of that intellectual chaos stepped Gregory of Nazianzus, a brilliant thinker who was ready for the fight of his life.
So, to really get a handle on Gregory's genius, we first have to understand the battlefield. This wasn't just some friendly chat over coffee. This was a high-stakes war of ideas that would define the future of Christian thought.
The whole thing was called the Arian controversy, and Gregory's opponents, a group known as the Eunomians, were sharp. They weren't just making things up, they were building their entire case on specific Bible verses. And their argument was pretty straightforward. These texts, they said, proved that Jesus, the Son, wasn't eternal God. He was a created being, which made him lesser than God the Father.
And this quote right here tells you everything about Gregory's mindset. For him, this wasn't some academic game. Talking about God was serious business, something almost dangerous. It required a certain purity, a real reverence. The stakes just could not have been higher.
And that brings us to the heart of his fourth oration. See, Gregory doesn't dodge the tough questions. No, he walks right up to his opponent's best evidence, their strongest scriptural proofs, and takes them on one by one.
Okay, let's look at their star witness, this verse from Proverbs. Everyone agreed that the wisdom speaking here was Christ. And the verse says, "The Lord created me." For Gregory's opponents, this was a slam dunk. The word is created. End of story. The Son is a creature.
But Gregory's move here was just brilliant. He doesn't try to deny the word. Instead, he completely reframes it. His opponents say, created proves he's a lesser being. Gregory says, no, that word is talking about his humanity, the part of him that was made for a specific purpose.
And here's how he pulls it off. He points out that the verse gives you the reason why he was created, with a view to his works. That cause, Gregory says, is our salvation, which points directly to his human nature. His eternal, divine nature, that's described by a totally different word, begotten, which means sharing the same essence, not being made from scratch.
All right, on to challenge number 2, and this one's a direct quote from Jesus himself. The Father is greater than I. I mean, come on. For the Eunomonians, this was checkmate. How can you be equal to the Father if you admit he's greater? And again, you see this huge clash in how they're reading the text. The opponents see greater and think it's about power, rank, and substance. But Gregory makes this incredibly subtle and powerful distinction. He says, you're thinking about nature. This is about origin.
Gregory's logic goes like this. Think of a spring and the river that flows from it. In a way, the spring is greater because it's the source, right? But that doesn't mean the river is made of something less than water. In fact, Gregory says the effect, the river, shares the exact same nature as its cause. So, being from the Father is actually the very thing that proves the Son is equally divine.
Okay, the final big one. This text seems to say that at the very end of time, the Son will be subjected to the Father. For his opponents, this was the knockout punch. It proved a permanent hierarchy, an inferior obeying a superior forever.
And here is the final, amazing pivot. Where his opponents saw a sign of inferiority, Gregory saw the beautiful completion of salvation. For him, this subjection isn't about the Son at all. It's about us.
Now, this is Gregory's masterstroke. He says that Christ, in his human form, basically absorbs our disobedience. So when we, all of humanity, are finally healed and subjected back to God through Christ, he is the one who presents that perfected humanity back to the Father. The subjection isn't his own. It's ours, completed in him. It's the ultimate victory, not a sign of defeat.
So you see, Gregory wasn't just coming up with clever one-off answers for each verse. He was working from a single, unified game plan the whole time. He had a master key.
So what was this secret weapon?
Was there really one single principle that could solve not just these 3 tricky verses, but every other seeming contradiction about Christ in the entire Bible?
Yes, there was. His master key was this simple but incredibly profound rule. You always have to ask, which nature is speaking? Gregory taught that when you read something lofty, words like Lord, King, Eternal, that's referring to his divine nature. But when you read something humble, words like created, weary, ignorant, that's referring to the human nature he took on for your sakes. Once you have that key, all the so-called contradictions, they just melt away.
Now, this whole framework wasn't just some neat debater's trick. It actually changed the course of theology forever. So why are we still talking about a 4th century argument? Why does this even matter today?
Well, because its legacy is just huge. Gregory's argument helped cement one of the core doctrines of Christianity, that Christ has 2 natures, being both fully divine and fully human. But beyond that, he gave us a powerful way to read difficult texts, not by ignoring the confusing parts, but by finding a deeper logic that holds them all together. He showed that using rigorous reason doesn't have to kill faith. It can actually be the best tool you have for exploring mystery.
And yet, and this is the amazing part, after all that intellectual firepower, Gregory doesn't end with a victory lap, he ends with incredible humility. He basically says that at the end of the day, all our arguments, all our words and images, they're just shadows. The real goal was never to win the debate, but to get to a more reverent conception of a truth that's bigger than all of us.
And that kind of leaves us with a question for our own time, doesn't it? In our own search for truth, whether it's in science or philosophy or our own faith, how do we follow that example? How can we use our minds to their fullest, to reason and argue and explore, while still leaving room for the profound mysteries that will always be just beyond our reach?